He broke all the rules to save her from deep forest. Now she want to marry him. Adrian Foster knew every trail and hidden path in the Blackwood Forest, or at least he thought he did until that fateful autumn evening. As an experienced wilderness guide, he had built his reputation on respecting nature's boundaries and following the rules. But something about the faint blue glow emanating from beyond the restricted zone's marker made him pause on his way home. The dark veil had been off-limits for decades, marked by weathered signs warning of unstable ground and dangerous sinkholes. Local legends spoke of strange lights and disappearances, but Adrian had always dismissed them as campfire stories. Yet there it was, an ethereal luminescence that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat among the ancient trees. "Hello," he called out, his voice seeming to be swallowed by the unusually thick mist. The rational part of his mind screamed at him to turn back, but the strange light flickered again, weaker this time, almost like a cry for help. Taking a deep breath, Adrian ducked under the warning tape and stepped into the restricted zone. The air felt different here, heavier, charged with an energy that made the hair on his arms stand on end. The mist swirled around his boots as he carefully picked his way through the undergrowth, following the diminishing glow. He found her in a small clearing, lying unconscious among a bed of strange, luminescent flowers he had never seen before. Her dark hair spread out like a fan against the moss, and her pale skin seemed to have an almost pearlescent quality in the dying light. She wore what looked like a silvery dress that seemed to shimmer even without movement, made of fabric unlike anything he had ever seen. Adrian knelt beside her, checking for vital signs. Her pulse was weak but steady, and a nasty gash on her temple explained her unconscious state. "Miss," he whispered, gently shaking her shoulder. "Can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open, revealing irises of the most striking violet he had ever seen. She gasped, trying to sit up, then winced in pain. "The portal? Did anyone else come through?" she asked, her voice carrying an accent he couldn't place. "I'm alone," Adrian replied, supporting her back as she struggled to remain upright. "You're injured. We need to get you to a hospital." "No," the force of her response startled him. "No hospitals, please, they can't help me." She clutched his arm, her touch sending an unexpected warmth through his body. "I need somewhere safe, hidden." Adrian hesitated. Harboring someone found in a restricted area could cost him his guide license, maybe even lead to criminal charges. But something in those violet eyes spoke of genuine fear, and he couldn't bring himself to abandon her. "I have a cabin," he found himself saying. "It's remote, about 2 miles from here. Can you walk?" She tried to stand but stumbled, her legs giving way beneath her. Without thinking, Adrian scooped her up in his arms. She was surprisingly light, almost as if gravity had less hold on her. The strange fabric of her dress felt like liquid silk against his skin. "I'm Selene," she whispered against his chest as he began the careful journey back through the dark veil. "Selene Nightingale." "Adrian Foster," he replied, navigating around a fallen log. "And you're going to have to tell me what you were doing out here." "I will," she promised, her voice growing fainter. "But not all stories are safe to tell in the open. These woods, they have ears." As if in response to her words, a distant howl echoed through the trees, not quite wolf, not quite human. Adrian quickened his pace, trying to ignore the way the mist seemed to be following them, or how the shadows appeared to move against the wind. The journey to his cabin was tense, with every step feeling like they were being watched. Adrian's muscles burned from carrying Selene, but he didn't dare stop. The familiar sight of his cabin's porch light finally pierced through the gathering darkness, and he felt Selene relax slightly in his arms. Inside, he gently laid her on his couch and hurried to fetch his first aid kit. When he returned, she was examining her surroundings with an almost childlike curiosity, running her fingers over the rough-hewn wooden walls as if she'd never seen anything like them. "Your dwelling," she said softly, "it's made from the forest itself." "Built it with my own hands," Adrian replied, cleaning the wound on her temple. Now about that explanation. Selene caught his hand, her touch sending that same strange warmth through him. You've already risked much by helping me, she said. Are you certain you want to risk more by knowing the truth? Adrian looked into those extraordinary violet eyes and knew he had already crossed a point of no return. I think I crossed that line the moment I stepped into the dark veil, he admitted. She smiled then, a smile that seemed to light up the room more than his oil lamps ever could. Then I hope you're ready, Adrian Foster, because after tonight your world will never be the same. As the night deepened around his isolated cabin, Adrian settled in to hear Selene's story, unaware that his decision to help her would set in motion events that would challenge everything he thought he knew about his world and his heart. Dawn broke over Adrian's cabin, casting golden light through the frost-edged windows. 3 days had passed since he'd found Selene in the dark vale, and each day brought new mysteries. He watched from his kitchen as she stood by the window, her silhouette haloed by the morning light. The wound on her temple had healed with surprising speed, leaving only the faintest mark, but she still moved with a careful grace that spoke of hidden injuries. The Rangers are making their rounds again, Adrian said, noting the distant rumble of their vehicles. He'd been fabricating excuses to cancel his guided tour, knowing he couldn't leave Selene alone. They're searching the restricted zone more thoroughly than usual. Selene turned from the window, her violet eyes carrying that otherworldly wisdom that both intrigued and unsettled him. They sense the disturbance, she said softly. The portal's opening left, ripples. Adrian placed a mug of herbal tea before her. She'd shown an almost childlike fascination with the drink, claiming she'd never tasted anything like it. You still haven't told me exactly what you're running from. She wrapped her elegant fingers around the mug, and Adrian noticed again how they seemed to shimmer faintly in certain lights. Where I come from, she began, choosing her words carefully, our society is built on strict order. Every person has their designated role, their predetermined path. I was different. I asked questions that shouldn't be asked, saw beauty in things we were taught to ignore. A sharp knock at the door made them both freeze. Adrian motioned for Selene to hide in the bedroom while he approached the entrance, his heart hammering. Forest Service, a familiar voice called out. Open up, Foster. Adrian opened the door to find Ranger Marcus Blackwood, a man he'd known for years. Marcus, what brings you out here? The ranger's weathered face was creased with concern. We've had reports of strange lights in the dark vale. You seen anything unusual lately? Can't say that I have, Adrian replied, keeping his voice steady. Been staying close to the cabin these past few days, coming down with something. He forced a cough for good measure. Marcus's eyes narrowed slightly. That's not like you canceling tour, you never get sick. First time for everything, Adrian shrugged, then noticed Marcus peering past him into the cabin. You've got 2 cups on that table, the ranger observed. Adrian's mind raced. My sister Rebecca stopped by earlier. She's been bringing me soup, checking in. Funny, Marcus said. I just passed Rebecca in town. She mentioned she hadn't seen you in weeks. The silence that followed was deafening. Adrian felt the careful facade he'd built beginning to crack, but before he could respond, a melodious voice called from behind him. I can explain, Ranger Blackwood. Selene emerged from the bedroom, but something about her had changed. Her otherworldly beauty had somehow dimmed, making her appear more ordinary. Even her violet eyes now seemed a more common blue. I'm Jennifer Foster, Adrian's cousin from Seattle. I'm staying with him while he recovers. Adrian struggled to hide his amazement as she approached, extending her hand to Marcus. The ranger shook it, though his suspicious expression remained. Didn't know you had family out west, Foster, Marcus said. We're not close, Adrian replied, finding his voice. Jenny's the black sheep who moved to the city, but when she heard I was sick. Family is family, Selene finished, her accent completely gone, replaced by a perfect Pacific Northwest drawl. After a few more probing questions, Marcus finally left, though Adrian could tell he wasn't entirely convinced. As soon as the ranger's vehicle disappeared down the path, Seleni's appearance shifted back to normal, the change rippling over her like water. "How did you do that?" Adrian asked, still stunned. "A simple glamour," she replied, though she seemed drained by the effort. "In my world, we learn to adapt our appearance for protection, but it takes considerable energy here. Your world's physics are different." Adrian guided her to the couch as her legs trembled. "You risked exposing yourself to help me." "You risked everything to save me," she countered, her violet eyes meeting his. "I couldn't let you face consequences for your kindness." Something shifted between them in that moment, a tension that had been building since that first night in the forest. Adrian found himself reaching out to brush a strand of hair from her face, and where his fingers met her skin, that now familiar warmth spread through him. "Selene," he whispered, "what's really happening here between us?" She leaned into his touch, her eyes closing briefly. "In my world, we have a concept called soul resonance, when two beings' essential frequencies align perfectly. It's rare, almost mythical. I never believed in it until—" She opened her eyes, and Adrian saw in them a vulnerability that made his heart ache. "Until I felt your presence in the forest that night. You weren't just following the light, Adrian. You were following the pull of our resonating souls." The revelation hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility and danger. Adrian knew he should pull away, maintain some professional distance, but instead he found himself drawing closer. Selene's breath hitched as he cupped her face in his hands. "Is this why they're hunting you?" he asked softly. "Because you believed in something they said was impossible." A single tear traced down her cheek, glowing faintly like liquid starlight. "They're hunting me because I proved it was possible, because I found the courage to search for something more than their perfect, emotionless order. And now," she placed her hand over his heart, "now I've found it, and I'm terrified of what that means for both of us." The kiss that followed was inevitable, like gravity, like the tide following the moon. When their lips met, Adrian felt as though he could see through the veil between worlds, glimpses of crystal spires and starlit skies, of a civilization built on mathematics and light. But more than that, he felt complete, as though a piece of himself he'd never known was missing had finally clicked into place. As they separated, the air around them seemed to shimmer with tiny points of light, like fireflies made of stardust. Selene's eyes were wide with wonder and fear. "They'll have felt that," she whispered. "The resonance, it creates ripples they can track." Adrian pulled her close, protective instincts flaring. "Then let them come, we'll face them together." As night fell over the cabin, they held each other, watching the strange lights dance around them like silent fireworks. In the distance, something that wasn't quite thunder rumbled, and the shadows in the dark veil grew deeper. The hunt was beginning, but for now, in this moment, they had found their own piece of impossible magic, a love that bridged worlds. The night air crackled with unusual energy as Adrian and Selene made their way through the moonlit forest. A week had passed since their first kiss, and the strange phenomena around the cabin had only intensified. Lightning without storms, shadows that moved against their sources. The very air seemed to vibrate with anticipation. "We need to reach the resonance point," Selene said, her feet barely seeming to touch the ground as she moved. The silvery dress she'd arrived in had begun to glow more brightly with each passing day, as if responding to some unseen power. "It's time you knew everything." Adrian followed her lead, noting how the forest seemed to part before her, branches bending away of their own accord. They were heading toward the dark vale where he'd first found her. His flashlight beam caught glimpses of those same luminescent flowers, now spreading beyond the restricted zone. "The flowers," he said, "they're from your world, aren't they?" "They're echoes," she replied, pausing to touch one gently. The bloom pulsed with light at her touch. "When a portal opens between worlds, reality bleeds, things from my side seep through to yours." They reached the clearing where they'd first met, but it had transformed. The ground was now carpeted with the glowing flowers, their light casting everything in an ethereal blue glow. Above them, the stars seemed unusually bright, forming patterns Adrian had never seen before. Selene stood in the center of the clearing and raised her hands. The air around her began to shimmer, and suddenly the space between them filled with what looked like a three-dimensional projection of a city, but unlike any city Adrian had ever seen. Crystal spires rose into purple skis, bridges of pure light connected floating platforms, and beings of luminescent energy moved through streets that seemed to be made of flowing mathematics. "This is Luminara," Selene said, her voice carrying a note of both love and pain. "My home, we are the Luminarii, beings of energy and thought who learn to take physical form. Our civilization is built on the precise manipulation of reality itself, what you might call magic we understand as advanced physics." Adrian reached out to touch one of the projected buildings, watching his hand pass through it. "It's beautiful," he breathed. "It is," she agreed, "but beauty without freedom becomes a prison. Our society is governed by the Harmony, a council that believes perfect order is the key to advancement. They've eliminated what they consider dangerous emotions from our people. Love, passion, creativity. These are seen as chaotic forces that threaten their perfect system." The projection shifted, showing a massive structure that looked like a combination of a temple and a laboratory. "I was a researcher in the Resonance Institute. We studied the fundamental frequencies that connect all things across all dimensions. That's where I discovered something that shattered their carefully constructed worldview, the existence of soul resonance between our kinds." "Between humans and Luminarii," Adrian said, beginning to understand. Selene nodded, her violet eyes glowing brighter. The Harmony had always taught that humans were too chaotic, too emotionally unstable for true resonance, but my research proved otherwise. When I presented my findings, she faltered, the projection flickering. "They ordered all my research destroyed and demanded I undergo emotional reconstruction, a process that would have erased everything that makes me who I am." "So you ran," Adrian said softly, moving closer to her. "I fled through an experimental portal," she confirmed. "But in doing so, I proved another of their fears, that resonance could be used to bridge worlds. They're not just hunting me to silence my research, Adrian. They're coming because they believe this knowledge could lead to an uprising among our people. If others learned they could feel, could love." A distant crack like breaking glass interrupted her. The projection vanished as they both turned toward the sound. Through the trees, they could see unusual lights approaching, not flashlights, but floating orbs of pure energy. "They're here," Selene whispered, fear evident in her voice. "The Harmony's hunters." But another sound drew their attention in the opposite direction, the rumble of vehicles and human voices. The Forest Service, led by Ranger Blackwood, was also closing in. "Caught between two worlds," Adrian said grimly, taking Selene's hand, quite literally. She squeezed his hand, and he felt that familiar warmth spread through him, stronger than ever. "Adrian, there's something else you need to know. The resonance between us, it's growing stronger. Soon it will reach a critical point, and when it does—" "Freeze, this is the Forest Service." Marcus's voice boomed through a megaphone, cutting her off. Flashlight beams began to pierce the trees around them. At the same time, the otherworldly lights grew closer, and Adrian could now make out tall, elegant figures moving with impossible grace through the forest. Their forms seemed to shift between solid and energy, leaving trails of light in their wake. "Trust me?" Selene asked, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that took his breath away. "Always," he replied without hesitation. She pulled him close, pressing her free hand against his chest, directly over his heart. Suddenly, Adrian felt energy surge through him, not the gentle warmth he was used to, but a torrent of power that made every cell in his body sing with light. "What's happening?" he gasped, watching in amazement as his skin began to glow with the same pearlescent quality as hers. "The resonance isn't just connecting our souls," Selene said urgently. It's transforming you, making you like me. It's why they're so afraid because it proves our kinds can truly become one. The forest around them erupted into chaos. Forest Service rangers burst into the clearing from one side while ethereal hunters emerged from the other. But Adrian barely noticed them. He was transfixed by the changes rippling through him, by the way the world suddenly seemed to open up into new dimensions of perception. He could see the mathematical patterns underlying reality itself, could feel the quantum threads connecting everything. And strongest of all, he could feel his connection to Selene, a bond that seemed to transcend physical reality. "Stop them," a voice rang out in a language Adrian somehow understood despite never having heard it before. The transformation must not be completed. Marcus's voice overlapped. "Adrian Foster, you're under arrest for trespassing in a restricted area and harboring a suspicious person." But it was too late. The resonance between Adrian and Selene had reached its peak, and as their energies merged, a blast of pure light erupted from them, pushing back both human and Luminarii pursuers. In that moment of chaos and brilliance, as two worlds collided around them, Adrian realized there would be no going back to his old life. The question was, where would they go from here? The Dark Veil had become a battlefield of light and shadow. Adrian and Selene stood within a sphere of their combined energy, while around them the Luminarii hunters clashed with the Forest Service rangers in a chaos of confusion and fear. Marcus Blackwood stood frozen, his flashlight beam passing straight through one of the ethereal beings, his worldview crumbling before his eyes. "We need to move," Selene urged, her hand still pressed against Adrian's glowing chest. "The transformation isn't complete, you're vulnerable between states." Adrian could feel the truth of her words in every molecule of his changing body. He existed in two forms simultaneously, still solid enough to feel the forest floor beneath his feet, but light enough to see the quantum strings that bound reality together. The sensation was both exhilarating and terrifying. "The portal," he managed to say through the waves of energy coursing through him. "Can you reopen it?" A musical laugh that wasn't quite human escaped her lips. "Better, we can create a new one. The resonance between us, it's stronger than any artificial portal the Institute ever created." One of the Luminarii hunters, taller than the others and wearing what looked like armor made of crystallized light, stepped forward. "Selene Nightingale, you have violated the primary laws of dimensional segregation. Surrender now, and the human's transformation will be reversed before it's too late." "Too late for what, Sentinel Orion?" Selene challenged, her voice carrying a new authority. "Too late for your precious harmony to hide the truth, that humans and Luminarii aren't just compatible, they're complementary." Marcus had finally found his voice. "Foster, whatever you are now, whatever's happening, we can help. The government has protocols for unusual situations." Adrian looked between the two authorities, one human, one otherworldly, and felt a sudden clarity. Both sides sought to control, to contain, to maintain their separate versions of order. But the energy flowing through him showed a different truth, that boundaries were meant to be transcended. "I choose this," he declared, his voice resonating with newfound power. "I choose her, I choose us." The declaration sent a shockwave of energy outward. The luminescent flowers beneath their feet burst into brilliant bloom, their light forming a perfect circle around the clearing. Adrian felt the last vestiges of his purely human form dissolve, replaced by something new, a being of both matter and energy, solid yet luminous. The sentinel raised his hand, energy gathering around him. "Then you leave us no choice. The harmonies must be preserved." But before he could strike, something unexpected happened. The forest itself seemed to come alive, branches weaving together to form barriers, roots rising to create protective walls. Adrian realized with astonishment that he could sense the ancient consciousness of the trees, could feel how the dark veil itself had been shaped by countless dimensional blades over centuries. The forest, he breathed, it's been protecting this place, keeping people away, it knows. Seleni's eyes widened with understanding. A natural convergence point between worlds. That's why they restricted this area. Some part of your authorities must have known. Marcus lowered his weapon, a lifetime of unexplained phenomena in the dark veil suddenly making sense. The lights, the disappearances, the strange readings. We thought we were protecting people from geological hazards, but you were protecting them from the truth, the sentinel finished, an unexpected note of uncertainty in his melodious voice. Just as we were. The revelation seemed to hang in the air like suspended starlight. Around them, both rangers and hunters lowered their weapons, caught in a moment of shared understanding. The boundaries between worlds had never been as solid as either side had believed. Adrian felt Seleni's hand slip into his, their energies intertwining naturally now. Where their fingers met, spirals of light danced between dimensions. "Show them," she whispered. "Show them what the resonance revealed to you." Understanding perfectly, Adrian reached out with his new senses, projecting what he could now see, the intricate web of connections binding all things, the beautiful mathematics of existence, and most importantly, the potential for harmony that didn't require rigid control. The image held everyone transfixed. Even the sentinel's stern expression softened as he witnessed the pure truth of their resonance. This wasn't just about two beings from different worlds finding love. It was about the discovery of a fundamental truth that both societies had forgotten in their pursuit of order. But the moment of revelation was interrupted by a sound like shattering crystal. The dimensional barriers were becoming unstable, the energy of their transformation too powerful for this convergence point to contain. "The veil can't handle this much energy," Selene said urgently. "If we stay, both worlds could be damaged." Adrian looked at his cabin in the distance, at the forest he had always called home, then at the shimmering form of the woman he loved. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. "Then we leave," he said. "We find a place between worlds together." The sentinel stepped forward once more, but this time without hostility. "The harmony will hunt you across dimensions." "Let them try," Adrian replied, feeling the full power of his transformation settling into place. "Maybe what they find will change them too." As reality began to bend around them, Marcus called out one last time, "Foster, what should I tell people?" Adrian smiled, his form now as luminous as Selene's. "Tell them to look up at the stars and remember that boundaries are meant to be crossed. And sometimes, love is the most powerful force in any universe." The air between worlds shimmered with possibility, and as the dark veil blazed with otherworldly light, two souls bound by impossible love prepared to step into a new existence, neither fully human nor fully luminary, but something gloriously, perfectly in between. 1 year had passed since the night Adrian and Selene stepped between worlds. The dark veil had become a place of pilgrimage for those who sensed there was more to reality than either human science or luminary mathematics could explain. The luminescent flowers continued to bloom, marking a permanent thin spot between dimensions where, on quiet nights, visitors could sometimes hear whispers of impossible love stories. But far from Earth, in a pocket dimension that existed in the spaces between worlds, Adrian and Selene had created something extraordinary. Their sanctuary floated in a perpetual twilight, where the physics of both realms merged in beautiful chaos. Crystal trees with solid trunks bore leaves of pure energy, and butterflies with wings of light fluttered through gardens where earthly roses bloomed alongside stellar flowers. Adrian stood at the edge of their quantum garden, his form shifting naturally now between solid and luminous states. The transformation had completed months ago, leaving him neither human nor luminary, but a perfect blend of both. He watched as Selene emerged from their home, a structure that combined his love of rustic wooden cabins with her world's crystal architecture. "The resonance ripples are getting stronger," she said, joining him at the garden's edge. More couples are discovering their compatibility. The barriers between worlds are becoming more permeable. Adrian smiled, taking her hand and watching the now familiar dance of light between their joined fingers. The harmony can't keep denying the evidence. How many more have made the choice we did? 17 couples in the past month alone, Selene replied, her violet eyes sparkling. Each resonance bond creates new possibilities, new ways of existing between states. The Institute's latest readings suggest that reality itself is adapting to accommodate these unions. Their conversation was interrupted by a familiar crystalline chime, the sound of visitors arriving through the quantum corridor they maintained for allies from both worlds. Marcus Blackwood materialized first, now comfortable with interdimensional travel thanks to months of serving as Earth's primary liaison to their growing community. Behind him came a surprise. Sentinel Orion, his armor now softened with streaks of earthly colors. The Harmony has called for a general assembly, Orion announced without preamble. They're finally ready to discuss revision of the dimensional segregation laws. Marcus nodded, adding, and the United Nations has established a new department for interdimensional relations. They're requesting your presence at the first official summit. Adrian and Selene exchanged glances, years of shared thoughts passing between them in an instant. They had known this day would come, when their private rebellion would need to become a public revolution. We'll need to be careful, Selene said thoughtfully. Too much change too quickly could destabilize both societies. But not changing is no longer an option, Adrian finished. The resonance bonds are occurring naturally now. We can either help guide this transformation or watch it happen chaotically. They led their visitors into the garden where they had created a meeting space that made both humans and Luminarii comfortable. Living wood intertwined with crystal lattices, forming a space that existed in perfect balance between states. As they settled in to discuss the future, Adrian couldn't help but marvel at how far they'd come from that first night in the dark Vale. There will be resistance, Orion warned. Many in the Harmony still believe emotional connections are a weakness. And plenty of humans aren't ready to accept that reality is more fluid than they thought, Marcus added. Selene stood and with a gesture created a holographic representation of both worlds with their sanctuary floating in the space between. Then we show them what we've learned, that strength doesn't come from rigid control or separation, but from the harmony of differences. Every resonance bond proves that love doesn't weaken us. It transforms us into something greater than the sum of our parts. Adrian joined her, adding his energy to the projection. Together, they showed the possible future they had glimpsed, a reality where the boundaries between worlds became gateways rather than barriers, where different forms of existence enhanced rather than threatened each other. It won't be easy, he acknowledged. Nothing worth doing ever is. But we're living proof that the impossible is only impossible until someone loves deeply enough to prove otherwise. As if in response to his words, the garden around them bloomed with renewed vigor, roses intertwining with stellar flowers in a display of natural resonance. Above them, in the twilight sky of their sanctuary, new stars were being born, a physical light and quantum energy combining to create something that had never existed before. Marcus shook his head in amazement. When I first found you two in the dark Vale, I thought I was enforcing the law. I never imagined I was witnessing the beginning of a new universe. Not new, Selene corrected gently. Unified. Every resonance bond, every union between worlds heals an ancient separation that should never have existed. As their visitors departed and evening settled over their sanctuary, Adrian and Selene stood together at their favorite spot, where the garden met the quantum sea. Their forms shifted and merged, two beings existing in perfect resonance, their love having literally changed the fabric of reality. Do you ever regret it, Selene asked softly, leaving your world behind? Adrian pulled her close, their energies intertwining in that familiar dance of light and matter. How can I regret choosing all worlds? You didn't just show me your reality, my love. You showed me that reality itself is as boundless as our capacity to love. Above them, the stars of two universes twinkled in harmony, and in the garden behind them, new flowers bloomed, their petals both solid and light, matter and energy. A perfect metaphor for love's power to transform not just lovers, but existence itself. Their story had become legend in two worlds, whispered in the dark vale and sung in the crystal spires of Luminara. But for Adrian and Selene, it was simply the truth of what happens when two hearts resonate strongly enough to rewrite the rules of reality. Their love hadn't just bridged worlds, it had created a new way of existing, proving that sometimes the greatest act of rebellion is simply to love beyond all boundaries and limitations. And in their garden between worlds, where stars and earth met in impossible harmony, they had finally found their true home not in one world or another, but in the beautiful space between, where love made all things possible.